It is the middle of the day. The sun is directly overhead, and the air near the well is still and hot and dry in the way that only desert air can be, the kind of heat that pushes everything living into the shade. Every sensible person in Sychar is inside. The women of the village came to this well at dawn, the way they always do, in groups, talking, filling their jars while the morning was still cool. They are gone now. But one woman is walking toward the well at noon. She is alone. She carries a jar. She does not look up at the man sitting on the edge of the stone. And then he speaks to her.
In that moment, 3 laws are broken simultaneously. He is Jewish. She is Samaritan, 2 groups that had not spoken civilly in 5 centuries. He is a man. She is a woman. And the rabbis had been clear about this. The Talmud recorded it plainly. Do not speak excessively with a woman, not even your own wife, in public. And he is a rabbi. She will call him that herself before the conversation ends. And rabbis especially did not do this. He speaks to her anyway. Before this conversation is over, he will tell her something he has told almost no one else on earth. Now, there is another woman I want you to think about. She is standing in the dark outside a sealed tomb on the edge of a city, and the stone has already been rolled away, and the body inside is gone. She is weeping. She turns and sees a man she does not recognize, and she asks him where they have taken the body. And then he says one word, just her name, and she knows exactly who he is.
We will get to her, but not yet. Because to understand why that moment matters, to feel the full weight of it, you need to understand what the world was like for women when Jesus walked into it. In the 1st century, a Jewish man began each morning with a prayer. It was one of 3 blessings recited at dawn. He thanked God that he was not born a Gentile. He thanked God that he was not born a slave, and he thanked God that he was not born a woman. The historian Josephus, a 1st century Jewish priest and scholar who lived through the fall of Jerusalem, wrote that women's legal testimony was not admissible in court on account of the levity and boldness of their sex. In the temple in Jerusalem, women were permitted only as far as the court of women. There was a low stone barrier beyond it, and they could not go further. In a synagogue, women sat behind a screen or in a separate gallery. They could hear the Torah read. They could not read it themselves.
This is the world Jesus stepped into. And in that world, he spoke to women, constantly, deliberately, in public spaces, in crowds, across ethnic lines, across ritual barriers, in moments so socially explosive that his own disciples came back from an errand one day and found him deep in conversation with a Samaritan woman at a well. And the text says this specifically, not one of them asked him what he was doing or why he was talking to her. They wanted to, but they didn't ask. Every conversation he had with a woman broke something. A rule, an assumption, a barrier. Every single one. And every single one changed the woman forever. These are their stories. Her name is not recorded in the Gospel of John. For centuries, she was simply called the woman at the well. But in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, the tradition that preserved many of the early accounts the Western Church let go, she has a name, Fotini, and she is venerated as a saint and an evangelist, which means that somewhere in the long memory of the Church, someone understood that what happened at that well was not just a conversation. It was a commission.
She comes to the well at noon, not at dawn like everyone else. The detail is too specific to be accidental in a gospel as carefully constructed as John's. She comes alone, in the heat, when no one else is there. This is the picture of a woman who has learned that other people's presence brings difficulty. She has had 5 husbands. We don't know why. Death, divorce, abandonment,
some combination. The text does not explain, and it does not condemn. What we know is that the man she is now with is not her husband, and she is alone at a well at noon, and a Jewish rabbi sits down and asks her for water. She says, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" He says, "If you knew who was asking, you would ask him, and he would give you living water." The conversation moves fast after that. She is sharp. She pushes back at every turn. When he tells her to go get her husband, she says flatly, "I have no husband." He says, "You are right. You have had 5, and the one you have now is not your husband. You have spoken truly."
Here's what most people miss. He does not shame her. He does not lecture her. He states what is true, and then he moves on. Because this conversation is not about her past. It is about what he is about to tell her. She asks about worship, where the proper place to worship God is, the great dispute between Jews and Samaritans. He gives her a theological answer that scholars are still writing books about. And then she says, "I know that the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will tell us all things." And he says, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." This is the first explicit "I am" declaration in the Gospel of John. Not to the Pharisees, not in the temple, not to the 12 disciples gathered around a table. To a Samaritan woman, alone at a well at noon, who came to draw water and left without her jar, because she ran back to her village and said, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did." Could this be the Christ?
She becomes the first person in the Gospel of John to evangelize a crowd. And it works. The text says many Samaritans believed because of her testimony. Stay with me, because there is a second woman, and her story is harder. She has been bleeding for 12 years. 12 years. Under the law in Leviticus, a woman with a blood discharge was ritually unclean. This is not a minor inconvenience. This is total social exile dressed in religious language. Everything she touched was unclean. Every surface she sat on was unclean. Every person who touched her became unclean. She could not enter the temple. She could not go to the synagogue. She could not touch her children if she had them, without making them ceremonially unclean. She was, by the standards of her world, untouchable. Legally, ritually, socially. For 12 years. The text says she had spent everything she had on doctors. Every physician she could find. Nothing worked. She was broke and isolated and getting worse. And then she heard that a healer was passing through.
She does not push to the front. She does not call out to him. She does not ask permission. She knows that if she touches him, she makes him unclean under the law. And she does it anyway. She reaches through the crowd and touches the fringe of his cloak from behind. And immediately she knows in her body that the bleeding has stopped. Jesus stops. He turns around. He says, "Who touched me?" The disciples think this is a strange question. There are dozens of people pressing against him. But he is not asking about the crowd. He is asking about her. And when she comes forward, trembling, she is terrified because what she did was illegal under Levitical law. She has just made a rabbi ritually unclean. She falls at his feet and tells him the whole truth. And he calls her thugater, daughter. In the Greek text,
He gives her a name for herself she has not had in over a decade. Not unclean, not untouchable. Daughter. By now, a pattern is starting to form. And it is worth slowing down to name it, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every woman Jesus spoke to was given something the world had taken from her. The woman at the well had lost her reputation, her standing, her belonging in her own community.
Jesus gave her truth, and then a mission. Go and tell. The bleeding woman had lost 12 years of touch, of inclusion, of the simple human right to exist among other people without contamination. Jesus gave her family, the word daughter, and sent her in peace. The pattern is not accidental. It is a method. He sees exactly what has been stripped from each woman, and he gives it back. Specifically, personally, in the exact form she needs it. Pay attention to what happens next, because the next story is the most legally dangerous thing Jesus does in all 4 Gospels.
The scribes and Pharisees bring a woman into the temple courts. They throw her in front of the crowd. They announce that she was caught in adultery, in the very act. Under Mosaic law, the penalty is death by stoning. They want to know, what does he say? There is something in this scene that the text does not draw attention to, but that you cannot miss once you notice it. Adultery requires 2 people. The man is not there. Only the woman is dragged in front of the crowd. Only the woman is named as deserving death. The man, wherever he is, has been permitted to leave. The woman alone stands in the dust of the temple courts, with a crowd of men preparing to kill her. Jesus bends down and writes in the dirt with his finger.
2,000 years of scholars have tried to figure out what he wrote. Some say he was writing out the sins of her accusers. Some say he was writing names. Some say he was writing the law itself, the passage that required 2 witnesses, which they may not have had. We do not know. The text does not tell us. What the text tells us is that he writes, and then he stands up and says, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And he bends down and writes again. They leave, the oldest ones first, one by one, from oldest to youngest, until there is no one left. The woman is standing in an empty courtyard, just her and him. He straightens up. He says, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She says, "No one, Lord." He says, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more."
The Greek word he uses for woman here is gune. In that culture, gune was not a diminutive. It was not a term of pity. It was the same word used to address a queen. It is the word Jesus uses from the cross when he addresses his own mother. Gone, woman, behold your son. It is a word of respect. She came in dragged by men who wanted to kill her. He addresses her as Gune, and then he tells her she is free to go. No lecture, no conditions attached to the forgiveness, no 12-step program. Go, and from now on, choose differently. The men who brought her were trying to trap Jesus. If he said stone her, he violated Roman law, which reserved capital punishment for Rome. If he said release her, he violated Mosaic law. He walked out of the trap. But the woman walked out of it too. She walked out of a circle of men with rocks in their hands. She walked out because he refused to let her be a theological argument. She was a person, and he treated her like one. Her name is Martha, and she is running.
Not literally, but there is something in the way the text describes her that feels urgent. Her brother has been dead for 4 days. The house is full of mourners. Mary, her sister, is inside, sitting in grief the way grief makes you sit, still, paralyzed, unable to move. But Martha hears that Jesus is coming down the road, and she goes out to meet him. She does not wait. She walks out of the house and she meets him on the road, and she says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Sit with that sentence for a moment.
She is not simply expressing grief. She is making a theological claim in the middle of her grief. She believes something specific about who this man is and what he is capable of, even now, after 4 days. That is not despair. That is a very specific kind of faith that coexists with pain, and it is rarer than people think. Jesus says, "Your brother will rise again."
She says, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." This is the standard Jewish answer, the safe answer, the answer every good Jewish person would give. And then Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live." This is the fifth of the 7 great I am statements in the Gospel of John, the most theologically dense series of self-declarations in the New Testament. These 7 statements are the reason theologians have argued for 2,000 years about who exactly Jesus understood himself to be. And the fifth one, "I am the resurrection and the life," is delivered not in a synagogue, not to the high council, not to the 12 disciples at the Last Supper. It is delivered on a dirt road outside the village of Bethany, to a woman whose brother has been dead for 4 days, and who walked out of a house full of mourners to ask why he hadn't come sooner. Martha receives the great theological declaration, on a road, in grief. And this is where it gets remarkable. Because the next woman is not Jewish. She is not even from the same region. She is a Canaanite woman. Matthew calls her that, using a term so ancient it evokes the enemies of Israel from the time of Joshua. And she comes shouting after Jesus and his disciples in the street, begging him to heal her daughter, who is tormented by a demon. Jesus does not answer her. The disciples urge him to send her away. She is making a scene. He says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." She kneels in front of him. She says, "Lord, help me." He says, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." This is the hardest thing Jesus says to anyone in the Gospels. Scholars have wrestled with it for centuries. Was he testing her? Was he reflecting the cultural assumption in order to dismantle it? Was this a teaching moment for the disciples, standing there watching? We cannot know entirely. What we know is what she does next.
She does not flinch. She does not shrink. She takes the metaphor he used and turns it back on him with better logic. She says, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." She is not asking for the bread. She is asking for the crumbs. The crumbs would be enough for her daughter. She wins the argument. And Jesus says, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." The only time in any of the Gospels Jesus says the words great faith, megale pistis in the Greek, he is speaking to a Gentile woman. Not to Peter, who walked on water. Not to the disciples, who had left everything to follow him. To a mother who argued with him in the street until he said yes. Her daughter is healed at that moment. There is one more woman before we get to the tomb. She is small in the story and easy to pass over, which is exactly why she should not be.
She is a widow. Her only son has just died, and the funeral procession is leaving the city gate of Nain when Jesus arrives. The text says Jesus saw her and had compassion on her. The Greek word is esplagnisthe. It means compassion in the most physical sense, the kind of emotion felt deep in the chest and stomach. He goes to the bier. He tells her son to rise. The boy sits up and begins to speak. And the text says Jesus gave him back to his mother. Not to the crowd, not to the city, to her. She does not ask. She does not speak a single word in the story. He simply sees her and cannot let it stand. Now we get to her. It is before dawn on the first day of the week. The city is quiet. The disciples are locked in a room somewhere, afraid. The crucifixion was 3 days ago,
and everything they had believed and followed and left their lives for appears to be over. Peter denied him 3 times in the courtyard of the high priest. Judas is dead. The others scattered.
But Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb. She goes in the dark. She carries spices. She goes to finish the burial preparation that was rushed before the Sabbath, an act of service to a dead man, which means she is not going to the tomb expecting anything except grief and the smell of myrrh and the weight of a stone that has already been sealed. The stone is rolled away. The tomb is empty. She runs and tells Peter and the other disciple. They come, they look, they see the burial cloths lying there. And then, the text says this in a way that is almost breathtaking in its brevity. They went home. They went home. Mary stays. She stands outside the tomb weeping. She bends down and looks inside, and there are 2 angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been. They ask her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She says, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him."
She turns around. There is a man standing there. She assumes he is the gardener. This is a reasonable assumption. It is a garden. It is early morning. He might be the one who tends the grounds. He says, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" She says, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." She is offering to carry a body by herself. She will do it herself if she has to. He says one word, her name, Mary. And in that instant she turns back, and she says, Rabboni, which means teacher. This is a resurrection appearance. This is, by any theological accounting, the most significant event in human history, if Christianity is true. The first conversation of the risen Jesus is not with Peter, the leader of the disciples. It is not with John, the beloved disciple. It is not with Pilate, to show him he was wrong. It is with a woman, alone, in a garden, weeping. And then he gives her a mission. He says, "Go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." In Latin, the Church Fathers gave her a title for this, Apostola Apostolorum, the apostle to the apostles, the one who carries the news to those who would carry the news to the world. Now here is where it lands. Josephus, the historian who told us that women's testimony could not be admitted in a Jewish court on account of the levity and boldness of their sex. Josephus is describing the world that Jesus walked into, a world where a woman's word did not count, a world where her testimony was, legally, worth nothing, a world that had arranged its entire religious and civil structure to keep her voice out of the official record. And the first witness to the resurrection is a woman. This is not an accident. Nothing in the Gospels is an accident. If you were inventing a resurrection story in the 1st century and you wanted people to believe it, you would not choose a woman as your first witness. Her testimony would be dismissed immediately. You would choose Peter. You would choose a Roman soldier. You would choose anyone the culture would consider credible. But it is Mary, weeping in a garden at dawn, and Jesus says her name. The God of the universe, on the other side of death, in the first moment of a new creation, speaks one word, a woman's name. So what do we do with all of this? 3 things, and the third one is the one I want you to carry with you. The first is this. Jesus did not merely tolerate women. He sought them out. He crossed cultural lines to find them. He initiated conversations they were not supposed to have. He went to the well at noon. He stopped in a crowd and asked who touched him. He stood between a woman and the men who wanted to stone her.
He walked out to meet Martha on the road instead of waiting at the house. This was not passive. This was not accidental. Every conversation was a choice, and every choice cost him something in the eyes of his own culture.
The second is this. Every woman he spoke to was given back something that the world had taken from her. Her dignity, her belonging, her name, her theological voice, her mission, her son. The specific thing that her specific situation had stripped away. He returned it. He did not hand out generic encouragement. He saw exactly who each woman was and exactly what she had lost, and he addressed that. Specifically, he called the bleeding woman daughter in a culture that had made her untouchable. He told the woman at the well the deepest truth about himself before he told most of his own disciples. He let Martha speak the great theological confession on a dirt road in the middle of her grief. He did not give them platitudes. He gave them themselves back. And the third thing? This is the one. The first word spoken after the resurrection was a woman's name.
Not a doctrine, not a command, not a theological proclamation. One word, a name. Her name. In a garden, before dawn, while the disciples were still behind locked doors. If you have ever felt like your voice does not count, if you have ever felt like the world has arranged itself in a way that leaves you out, if you have ever come to the well at noon, alone, because you have learned that other people's presence brings difficulty, if you have ever reached through a crowd from behind, because you could not ask, you could only reach. He already turned around. He already asked who touched him. He already knows your name.